Hello, good evening and welcome. Welcome to your show, Glow with Mary. This evening we have a very topical social issue to be discussed, and I hope you are all set with your questions and comments, and also to just follow us and learn, because it's all about education and awareness. Living the life you love includes being aware of when danger is imminent, being aware of when to take very good care of yourself, those around you, the dangers around us, and how we can safeguard not just ourselves, but members of our families, look out for friends, and generally be well. Yes, this evening we're going to be talking and sharing about HIV and AIDS, the difference between the two, the myths surrounding it, why we should be aware, the treatments available, and other issues that we are not even aware of, or we've always wanted to know about but never had the opportunity to ask or check or know. Especially the myths surrounding every other social issue about culture, religion, perception, and the rest of it. Anyway, with me in the studio this evening, I've got this amazing person who is also an epidemiologist. Aren't we lucky? And that is amongst other things. Okay, I can go on and on about what this wonderful woman is capable of doing. Let me introduce to you, and she will tell us more about herself. Ayewu Walker Intender. Mrs. L, you're welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. So tell us a bit about yourself before we go
Okay.
on.
I'm Ayewu Walker Intender. I am Ayewu Lamidi. Amongst other things, I'm an epidemiologist, and my specialty is HIV. I kind of got stumbled into it by mistake, but then I very quickly became part of me and what I do and what I enjoy to do. At the moment, I work in clinical trials, and the clinical trials that I work in cover a broad area, and it's not only HIV. There's a lot more that I do at the moment, but HIV is still sort of my key focus and my key passion.
Okay. Wow, that is great. So we're in for a treat then.
I hope so.
I hope viewers at home, you are all set to get the best out of this 1 hour. And like I said, we have lots of questions actually, inbox and via email, which we sort of gone through. We'll try and go through all of them. But because of the importance and the relevance of this topic, we think we may have to do, another session in future. So if we do not cover your questions today, they will be answered at a very near future. But let's see how we go. We aim to cover all the questions. Okay, so please tell us, educate us about the difference, because you and I know that sometimes we get mixed up with AIDS, HIV, which is which and which does what.
Okay, so HIV is a virus. It stands for human immunodeficiency virus. It's a virus, and it's a virus that causes AIDS. Now, AIDS is a syndrome. AIDS is an acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So people get infected with the virus and don't necessarily have AIDS. AIDS is what comes at the end of being infected. So somebody can be infected with the HIV virus for 10 years, 8 years, and be totally asymptomatic, not show any outward sign. But in the meantime, the virus is working on the immune system and killing the cells off, killing the T cells off gradually. And then when the virus eventually takes over and kills enough immune cells, then it takes over. Now, AIDS is a syndrome in the sense that it is not an actual disease. So what AIDS is you get to a place where your immune system is so weak that it can't fight off ordinary things. Yeah. So ordinary things which a normal person will have and fight off, your body can't fight it anymore, because all of these cells that would normally help you to fight off these little germs or whatever they are are dead.
Yeah, so a little like cold.
A little cold becomes something major.
Yeah.
A lot of people, for instance, would have thrush fungus, but it's not something that generally affects people. However, people who have like very, very weakened immunity, it becomes something where they have oral thrush and it's all over their mouth. The mouth, and it's all over their mouth with it's infected with thrush and it's all sort of spilling out. And you would never find such a thing in a healthy adult, for instance. So it's things that would never that normally wouldn't affect you. They begin to be really, really serious because your body's not able to fight them, and that is when you can describe the person as having AIDS. So it's at the end of the infection, 8 years later, 10 years later, 15 years later, or even longer. HIV too, even longer, 20 years later. When you don't have any immunity left to fight something really, really simple, that's when you have AIDS. It's an acquired immunodeficiency.
This is very educative and important because a few years ago, if you see anybody losing
you say, oh, you have AIDS.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you better beware. The last time we saw them, they went that thin. I wonder what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then, of course, over the years, there's been various aspects of, before we go into education and awareness and prevention, which I think is very broad.
Absolutely.
We hope to address extensively because I believe this is very vital.
Of course.
Especially in the concept of this. Let's talk about the tests available.
Okay.
Once people perceive or know that they've been in contact with somebody who might be HIV positive, for instance.
Okay, so with testing, there's also kind of a different dimension and a different way to look at it. Sometimes people go into clinic and get tested and say, oh, I think I think I might have come in contact with somebody who sleeps around, so maybe I'm HIV positive. But then again, to be honest with you, somebody can catch AIDS can catch HIV by sleeping with somebody once, and your partner doesn't necessarily have to have had multiple partners. They probably just have to have had sex with somebody who's had multiple partners. So people do go into test, but they do go in and test when they think that they've come into contact. Now, I think in the UK it's estimated that 1 in 5 people who's HIV positive doesn't know.
Wow.
So that's a large number of people who think, oh, I haven't really,
no symptoms,
and no risk factors. Are really, I'm monogamous or whatever, and I'm not an intravenous drug user. Or, I'm not
the boxes.
They tick all the boxes, and they think, no, I'm fine. But it's 1 in 5. That's 20%. That's large. So that's 10 people standing here who are HIV positive. 2 of them don't know. And those 2 can go on and infect and infect and infect and infect because they don't know. So with testing, it's twofold. People, there's the sort of conventional wisdom or conventional wisdom, if you like, that's out there that says, look, don't have unprotected sex with somebody until you're sure of what their status is and they're sure of what your status is. I mean, testing has really come a long way, though. I mean, I know that there's a lot of testing, and you have Terence Higgins Trust, who have done a tremendous work in the area of HIV and in the area of HIV awareness and HIV testing. And sometimes you go to nightclubs in Soho, and there are people there who have the rapid test where they can kind of just scrape the inside of your cheek and test it. And very, very recently there was a home testing kit that has been introduced, and I think that's kind of one of the success stories. So it's a box that you receive, and you prick yourself and kind of press the blood into the tube,
like a glucometry.
And then you send it away, and then you send it away, and then you can check online for the results, or you can phone. You can phone there's a number you can phone in and check. Or I think what also happens is, so you check your results. I'm not sure if the results are actually published online or not, but I know that there are the results. But then it will tell you, phone this number.
Able to just the the person who's done the test rather than.
Well, no, it's you have to log in. So yeah, you have
so
your login details. Yeah, but I'm not sure whether I'm not sure at the moment whether the actual result, you actually see the result there, or you're negative or you're positive. But I know that there will be a number which you can phone, and it's when you phone the number, you speak to the doctor who says, you know, you're positive or you're negative, or, you know, that sort of a thing. So there's that, you know, there's that as well. And it's come a really, really long way compared to before, you know, where it was just you had to wait days, or you had to wait weeks, and then but now there's a rapid testing, so really it covers all sorts, and so there's the antibody testing, and then after the antibody testing, you also have a PCR, which is where they actually take your blood and to actually check if there's actually, you know, virus in the blood itself. So I think in what would generally happen in England is if you have a positive antibody test, you will also have to have a confirmatory PCR test to make sure that it is actually the actual virus.
Before you are started on medication.
Before you started on medication, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's how about the false negative and the false positive?
Positive. Okay, so a false negative is when you test yourself and it says negative, but you're actually positive.
Oh my God.
Okay, so that's rare. Like I know that with the test that they do, that Terence Higgins or that they do with the cheek, it's very rare to get false negative. But if you're if it says you are positive, you are positive.
You are positive.
Yeah,
okay.
But it's very rare to get a false negative. Now with the false negatives, a lot of times what would normally happen is somebody has sex with somebody who they think is high risk, and they think, oh my goodness, I might be infected, and they go in and get tested. But there has to be that window for your body for you to wait for your body to actually make antibodies. So you might have virus, but your body hasn't made any hasn't mounted any defenses against the virus, so you don't have any antibodies. So it says, oh no, you're negative. It's only saying you're negative because there are no antibodies. The time lapse, yeah. So you've gone within that window, and I think they normally say, well, you know, it should be done, you know, like 6 months after, where you've had a risky episode, so to give your body enough time to make antibodies, etc. And I know that there's also a campaign for post-exposure prophylaxis as well, and I think a lot of it is being trialed, and a lot of it is actually being used. I think a lot of it is being used as well in routinely, where people think that they've had a risky episode or whatever, and they go in to sexual health clinic and they get given prophylaxis as well.
You know the problem with that, because in my line of work we are highly one of the high risk professions, especially working in theaters. I've had people who's had to have that. And it's as bad.
It is pretty bad. No, it is pretty bad. And they give you a very, very high dose. I think the idea behind it is, okay, there's HIV. We're gonna kill it dead. Yeah, we're gonna throw everything at it. And so it's pretty nasty. Yeah. And so it's not something that you should, that every single time you think, I've had risky sex, I'll go and have it. It's not something that you should do routinely. Yeah. Rather, it's better for you to use a condom. Prevent it, so you don't. It's like people who always go for the morning after pill instead of taking what do you call it, contraceptives routinely. That sort of thing.
Yeah, in fact, that was going to be my next question before I remember is that a time lapse between being exposed and having a prophylaxis?
I think it's 72 hours. So it's like so it has to be pretty close. But then obviously it's not foolproof. I know it's not foolproof. I know of somebody who not in the UK, outside of the UK, who was raped and took prophylaxis, but still ended up being HIV positive. So it's not foolproof. Yeah. It's certainly not foolproof. I think it's probably better for you to just use a condom.
Exactly. Right, and on the basis of that, talking about prevention, talking about using condom, prophylaxis, then we have the moral story of people who are aware that they're HIV positive, and they still go on and infect.
Yeah. So in the UK, it's a crime. it's in the UK, not just in the UK, in a lot of
Some
other
African
EU
countries as well, and in Asia. I think.
in Asia, it's a crime. It's a crime to know, and in Canada as well, it's a crime to know that you're HIV positive and deliberately, deliberately infect somebody, if you like. And I use the term deliberately infect very, very loosely, because if you know that you're HIV positive, then you do know that there is a risk that you're going to pass it on to a partner if you're not using any protection. Now, that act in itself is looked upon like, you're deliberately infecting them.
Yeah.
You're deliberately exposing them to the virus. So it is a crime in the UK. It's a crime in most of Europe, actually. And it's a crime where you actually go to jail, where you're put in jail for.
Yeah, I mean, rightly so too, because it's like manslaughter if you think about it, because, I mean, bordering on murder.
I think it's nothing like manslaughter. I think manslaughter is good. Manslaughter, you didn't mean to kill somebody and you just killed them by accident, But with this, it's a life sentence.
Murder.
Yeah, I know. There's campaigners who say it will be demonizing people who are HIV positive. They won't come forward. And that sort of a thing. But the truth about the matter is, if you do know that you're HIV positive, then it's not really morally right to deliberately pass it on. It's something completely different if you disclose to your partner that, look, I'm HIV positive. I'd rather not use a condom. Is it okay with you?
With you, yes.
So that the ball is in their court, and they have the opportunity to say, I'd rather use a condom, or I don't mind.
Yeah.
But I think deliberately, hiding it is
because I got a bit confused about that campaign as well, saying you will demonize them, they wouldn't come forward. But what we're saying is, come up front anyway.
Come front to the person that you're going to have sex with. You don't have to tell the whole world.
No.
But by the time you get to a stage where you're going to be intimate with somebody, then I think the morally right thing to do is to say, look, by the way, I'm HIV positive.
Yeah.
I'm on HIV medication. So it's less likely that you'll be infected. However, we still need to use a condom. This is the situation. Yeah, and I think with anything, honesty is the best policy.
So that brings us to the stigma and discrimination.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because with these campaigners saying, you're demonizing them, it means in their minds, actually, they are saying these people are being discriminated against, they are being stigmatized, and now let's bring it home to Africa.
Okay, yes. Okay, now, HIV has been around sub-Saharan Africa for a long time. It has been around for about 30 years.
Yeah.
So the first cases we saw were in the 80s. Now, so in some parts of Africa, the epidemic is older than in some other parts, or it's kind of more prevalent than some other parts. But there is still stigma.
Yes.
Probably less so. I think the more open people are about their status, the more people see them and see, well, you know what, this person is like me.
Yeah, healthy.
Exactly. I know. I did work in a setting, in sub-Saharan Africa many years ago, and there were people who I worked with some people who I didn't know were HIV positive, and some people who I did know, and and some people who I didn't know, and then they eventually died, and I found out that so they were, and that sort of a thing. But the risk of passing it to somebody who you work with is so low that there is actually no danger in you sitting with
next
to them or that sort of a thing. So there doesn't need to be a stigma, but I think that now there's less of a stigma now that people are realizing that in every family in Africa there's at least one person who is infected, and it may not necessarily be your nuclear family. It might be an auntie or an uncle or a cousin, a friend of a friend. But most people who live in sub-Saharan Africa know at least one person who's infected. So I think that because of that, there is kind of less of a stigma. But I think also with the introduction of antiretroviral therapy, so people are living longer and are functioning normally like everybody else. And so you meet somebody who's HIV positive, and they've got the same life expectancy as I have. And they're doing things, and people are beginning to realize that, okay, so this HIV thing, is not well, it is bad. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the devil.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not. This
we
person's not
cannot
a
catch
devil.
it in the air. We cannot catch it just by sharing cups.
I cannot catch it just by hugging you or breathing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, and people are beginning to realize that, you know, my loved one is HIV positive. Am I going to discriminate against them? I think when you're able to put a name to a face,
yes.
it becomes more personal, and you're less likely to discriminate.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where Africa is going at the moment.
You know, like we've been saying, there's been lots of breakthrough in treatment, in prevention, in education and awareness, but still in Africa,
Yes.
to a large extent, it's still a terminally ill
It is.
problem.
It is.
Whereas here and in America, it's just a chronic illness.
It's just a chronic illness that is managed like every other illness. Well, I think in Africa there's been some really good success stories, but I think the main thing is you know. Is drugs being available to people. I know that a few years ago, a drug company, one of the biggest makers of a particular drug, decided that I know. Okay, how this sort of came about was the African market saying, well, if you're not going to sell, we can't afford to buy the drugs you are selling at that price. You know, and we actually need it. We've got more people who are HIV positive than you do, but we can't afford to. So we're just going to make our own. You know, the African market, the Indian market. We're just going to make our own. You know, and one of the drug companies, they were the first to go, and other companies followed. They said, oh, you know what? Okay, so what we will do is before this drug comes off patent, we will allow you make it. We'll give you the formula. We will allow you make it, and so that you can sell it at a lower price.
Yeah.
And I think they were the first to do it, and a few other drug companies sort of jumped on the bandwagon. But still, I think with Africa, because there's not that much testing, there's still quite a lot of stigma attached to it. There is, and because there's stigma, you're talking to people who are already struggling to have 3 square meals a day. You know, they're not going to have that extra amount of money. I know that a lot of there's a lot of research going on in Africa, and a lot of I think it's UNAIDS have a particular program where they're giving the drugs for free.
Yeah, and Global Fund.
Exactly. So you come in and you're part of a it's really mainly an observational study, really. So and you have to come in and you get the drugs, and a lot of people are being treated that way. But still, there's still a lot of stigma. There's a lot of people who do not know they're HIV positive. Yeah. There are a lot of people who suspect they're HIV positive, but would rather not get tested because they don't want it to be confirmed. They don't want to know. So the ostrich, they're burying their head in the sand and hoping it will all blow over. So there's a lot of that as well.
Oh God. Yeah, I think if we have more knowledge about how it's being transmitted, especially through specific activities, we were talking about, actually one of the questions was on high-risk exposure.
Okay.
And we talk about careers, we talk about doctors, nurses, and then we were talking about sex workers and how that needs to be redefined.
Okay, yes. It totally. I think the term commercial sex workers, totally needs to be redefined. Now, conventionally, a sex worker was a woman or man, if you like, who sold sex, who would stand on the roadside and get a john or get a punter, have sex with a person, and be paid for it, or sell sex from a brothel or something like that. But more recently, sort of in the last 15 years, the dynamics has actually changed. So like we're saying before, there are people who would not term themselves as commercial sex workers, and who I wouldn't call a commercial sex worker, but at the end of the day, they are selling sex for a favor. It might be that woman who really, really wants a promotion at work, and who her boss says, well, if you don't sleep with me, you're not going to get the promotion. And she thinks, oh, well, it might just be a one-off, or maybe for a few months, then I'll get my promotion. She wouldn't call herself a sex worker, and I wouldn't call her a sex worker either. But at the end of the day, really, she is selling sex and getting something back. Or vice versa, exactly.
Woman boss eyeing this younger guy.
Exactly. Exactly. Or you have house girls or housemaids who work in a house and the boss feels, well, you work for me, it's my right to sleep with you. My wife is away. Oh, wife is next door. It's my right to sleep with you. Or you get the girl who's at university and who her lecturer says, well, I know you've attended all my classes. I can't find your results. If you want me to find your result, you know what you you need to do. And so she's kind of conditioned herself to say, okay, for the 3 years that I'm going to be studying at university for this degree course, I know that I have to sleep with this lecturer in order to pass, or in order to, you know, whatever. Now those people won't term themselves sex workers either. You know, I wouldn't call them I wouldn't call them sex workers either. But I think the dynamics of what we define as commercial sex work has changed, and most of it actually stems from poverty, really.
Yes.
You know, so you find somebody who wants something and thinks, well, the only way to get it, I have nothing else to offer. The only way to get it is by sleeping with somebody else, or a girl who's at university, and maybe whose parents are not that well to do, so doesn't really get that much pocket money, and there's not much of a bursary coming from the government. She needs to survive. You know, she's a student. She needs to survive. So she just thinks, well, you know what, I will, you know, and people are offering her, well, you're a pretty girl, come to my office. Yeah, you
earn X amount of money. And do you know, actually, it's been in the news and well documented in newspapers and everything on TV that in the university, more and more students are using this kind of thing to, you know, sustain
themselves.
Studies,
yes,
and even people are using it to supplement their income.
Absolutely.
And some wives are aware, some husbands are aware, and some people it's because maybe they're alone, they're struggling.
Exactly. Yeah. So they know, well, the only way I'm gonna, you know, I have 3 children. I'm a single parent. I really can't support them, and the father is not stepping up to the plate. You know, here in the Western world, you get a lot of help from the government. Yes. You know, but realistically speaking, there's, you know, Africa, hardly any African country can be termed as a welfare state. So if you can't send your child to school, you don't have school fees money, you really are doomed. You know, you have to come up with it somehow. And sometimes it's by the Alhaji there said I should come to his house and collect the money. Well, you know what the Alhaji wants in exchange for the money, but you need the money, and so that's kind of what happens.
And the danger with that actually is, especially when you are at that stage of being in the university or being maybe a professional or elite, and using that to supplement your income, is the kind of people you come across, you tend to assume too much. Oh, they should be fine.
Exactly, and it's not written.
Yeah.
I mean, people catch HIV, and they are asymptomatic. They don't have any symptoms. They're not skinny. They're not. They don't have thrush.
They might be affluent. They may
absolutely. They're 100% healthy.
Yeah.
Until the virus has done what it's in the best interest of the virus to keep the person alive.
So they can feed.
So they can feed and grow and replicate, and that is what the virus is doing. When the virus thinks, well, you know what, change of environment is necessary. I've had enough. About 10 years after, exactly, 10 years after the person has been infected, then they go into full-blown AIDS, you know, and that is when you begin to tell that, okay, this person is sick, they have this illness which only people who are HIV positive have, but by then it's too late. For 10 years before that, they've slept with however many people they want to sleep with, pass it on to however many people they want to pass it on to, and especially if they're not on treatment, they're more likely to pass it on because they have a higher viral load.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that kind of makes it, that kind of adds a brand new dimension to it as well. So you can't tell that somebody's HIV positive just by looking at them.
Yeah, and that impacts on family life, especially. We go back to Africa now, because I think this is the community and the culture where this education and awareness is really needed.
Yeah. There's more people in Africa that are HIV positive than here in England. I think the population is about 100,000 people. Yeah. Whereas you get African countries where you have, you know, a million people.
3.4 million.
Exactly. So you have.
In South Africa is slightly higher than that. They're actually the epicenter.
Well, you see, Nigeria, the epidemic happened relatively later than in South Africa. However, because in Nigeria, the sheer number of people, Nigeria has a lot of people.
It's actually 3.1% in percentage.
In percentage. So in percentages, it's quite low.
Yeah, it's very low.
It's very low, but the sheer number of people who make up that, the population makes it, so 3.1% of 180 million people is a lot of people. Yeah. You know, so there's a lot of HIV there, and you know the awareness needs to be focused there as well, more so.
And also we go in and out of these African countries nilly-willy, you know. Yeah. So it's important as well to be able to, when we're stopped or ask questions, because sometimes
Yeah.
people see you are from abroad, they just want to ask. Not because you are in the health profession or anything like that. They just think you have more knowledge, more awareness,
Absolutely,
and more
absolutely.
to tell them. And it's important to be able to pass on the truth to them. And
As opposed to, yes.
yeah, on our
Yeah.
subject matter, I'm talking now about the impact of HIV/AIDS on the family, especially the children in African countries, where
There's a lot of
maybe
AIDS orphans.
yeah, they
Yeah.
are orphaned. When the father, for instance, is positive, the mom started taking care of father. Mom cannot go to the market or the farm anymore. Then the child becomes the breadwinner.
The child becomes a breadwinner, and the cycle of poverty continues. So the child becomes a breadwinner and is doing whatever they need to do so that they can rub two pennies together.
Yeah.
And then one Alhaji somewhere says,
Or village chief.
oh, village chief says, come to my house, I'll give you money. You know, and then he might be positive or whatever. You know, or the child becomes, you know, sexualized at a very, very early age. And it has, you know, the age of having sex, people who have sex earlier are more likely to be HIV positive than people who start having sex later. And it's just simply because you have sex earlier, then obviously you're going to have more sex partners than, you know, it's that simple. But it's that sort of a thing. The cycle continues, you know, so it's being repropagated again and again and again. I know when HIV first sort of devastated the African, sub-Saharan Africa, you know, late in the 80s and in the 90s, there were a lot of places where the middle generation, the people who were in their 30s, a lot of them were dying. So you had the older people and you had the younger people. So you had grandparents looking after grandchildren because the parents were not there. You know, and I mean, we talk about HIV prevention, et cetera, and we talk about success stories. Now, Uganda is one of the success stories.
Yes.
Uganda was one of the countries that was very much devastated by the epidemic when it first of all started. But then the government stepped in very quickly.
In fact, they didn't joke.
No. They were going to kill it and kill it dead.
All, yeah.
You know, so the government stepped in very quickly. There was a lot of AIDS awareness, a lot of campaigns to use condoms, and a lot of campaigns to say to women, you are able to ask your partner to wear a condom.
Yeah.
This is your life we're talking about, and you know you are able. You can do it. And there was a lot of HIV testing. Like I know I'm not really a strong advocate of churches saying, or before this couple get married, they have to have an HIV test and they have to parade the HIV test in church.
Oh my God.
Oh, they do it in some African countries, or in some churches rather. Now I'm not an advocate of that at all. At all, you know, because I think whatever adults do, if they're going,
I think that is what will stop them from testing.
Exactly, but say that the church will say we're not going to marry you if you don't test. But then they can go to another church that doesn't require them to test. And I think there in the world of HIV there are discordant couples. So where one person is HIV positive and the other one is negative, and they've stayed together successfully for years, you know, but they are aware of each other's status and they take precautions. You know, so I'm not an advocate of that. Before you get married, you have to produce an HIV negative certificate or whatever. I'm not an advocate of that as well at all. But in Uganda, this was done, you know, and it worked, and it worked because of the, oh my goodness, there's going to be a stigma attached to it. Oh my goodness, I better do this. Oh my goodness, I better do that. But then people were aware that, oh, hang on. Yes, I want to know your status before I get married to you. I want to know your status before we get together. And the Ugandan government has been you know very positive. And you do have people who you would have a woman who would say, oh, I found out I'm HIV positive, and the man's like, well, I found out I'm HIV positive as well. Okay, well then we'll get together. Okay. You know, and not spread it to other people. You know, so the Ugandan government was really proactive and did a lot of things which may not have been right. May not have been right. But all in all, I think the other strategies that were put in place as well are very commendable. You know.
Yeah, you know, I feel another topic coming up about whether you have to be tested before getting married. Put that side by side with having your sickle status.
Well, see, in Nigeria, I know in Nigeria in the 80s, the Catholic Church kind of made it kind of mandatory to know your sickle cell status before you got married. Yeah. But I mean, all in all, that didn't really deter people, if you like. I mean, but I don't know. I can't remember now. They said, oh, we won't marry you if you are a carrier, and if you're a carrier, you can't get married in the Catholic Church. That probably deterred people, and I know that it helped and it promoted awareness as well. But however, I think that with adults, with two consenting adults, that they get tested is entirely up to them,
yeah.
and up to
and what they do thereafter.
What they do thereafter
is up to them.
It's up to them.
Well.
I had a friend who then I was working in sub-Saharan Africa who was going out, who lived in America but was working was working in Africa at the time, and was going out with this girl and said, well, I like her, I'd really like to marry her. Let's do an HIV test. And they both went and got themselves tested. He went in and got his test, and she just didn't. She went in for the test, but when the results were out, she just did not show up. She didn't show up. To be honest with you, I think she probably already knew her status, but it turned out that she was positive. And he was devastated. But I think, to be honest with you, he was so in love with her, and he was at the stage that he would have married her anyway. Yeah. But unfortunately, she didn't know this because of the stigma that was attached, and the fact that in that part of Africa at that time, if you're HIV positive, it was a death sentence. Yeah. So it's a shame, but we do have discordant couples, and we do have discordant couples that go on to have children who are HIV negative.
Yeah, that's true actually. Yeah. So I mean, importantly, is about education, awareness, getting tested, getting treated.
Getting tested early. Getting tested early. Because I know the directive here is, once you're tested, then you can commence treatment. And I think they used to say, they have to check your viral load. If your viral load is below 350 or below 500, then we will treat you. But I think nowadays people are kind of leaning to the fact that, well, if you get tested and you're positive, unless you are kind of undetectable, you should be treated anyway. But it's still kind of being it's still in the pipeline, still kind of being thought about. But I think that here with the technological advances, whereby a man can be HIV positive and his wife is negative, and they go on and they have a baby. I mean, they basically just kind of wash the sperm and get rid of the virus. Yeah, get rid of the virus, and then the wife can be pregnant and she's still negative and has a baby who was negative as well. And in the UK, big success story whereby the public health directive is that every woman who is pregnant is offered an HIV test. Now you can decline, but I mean it's foolhardy to decline. But then if a woman is found to be HIV positive while she's pregnant, then they're able to prevent mother to child. Yeah, and it's happened very, very successfully in the UK, and there's very, very few people who've actually gone on to have children who are HIV positive, having known that they were HIV positive first before they had the baby. Now, if they did not know they were HIV positive and then they had the baby, then that's a different story. But women who already know who know that they're HIV positive, it's very, very rare in this country for them to actually go on and have a baby. I remember reading the statistics once, and I think in 2009 or something like that, it was only two children in the whole of UK who were born to women who knew they were HIV positive and then subsequently passed on the virus to them. And then in Africa, but that figure in Africa is in the thousands.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think with that you've answered one of the questions here about the preventing mother-to-child transmission in pregnancy and in breastfeeding. And we've talked about the voluntary home test counseling, which I think will be very useful in Africa.
Yes. So I'm not sure what the setup is like in Africa. I do know that people have to, if you want to be tested, you have to actually go into a primary care setting or whatever. You do have to go into a hospital or a lab or something. I'm not sure how. Yeah. So you actually do have to actually leave your house and go in and get tested. I know that earlier on in the 90s, when there were all of these campaigns to get people tested and HIV awareness, especially in some parts of sub-Saharan Africa, in Malawi, for instance, where I used to live, you get people who would actually go out into the village and set up a kind of like a makeshift test center and test, and then people will come out and get tested. So that in that way they were able to test people in villages, and people who ordinarily wouldn't kind of go to the major general hospital to get tested. So that's how a lot of people got tested. I'm not sure what the setup is like in Nigeria, and I'm not sure if that happens.
Yeah, I think in Nigeria mainly it's the hospitals and primary care trust, and then the funding from some of the initiatives.
And it's funding. It's funding from donors, if you like. Yeah. So I'm not sure how much the federal government is pumping into it, but I do think that there's a bit going on, because in the sense that the federal government is teaming up with a lot of these other initiatives, and so I do think that a few years ago, if you'd asked me, I'd have said, look, Nigeria is in the lull just before you get to a devastating storm, because Nigeria sort of came in a bit later in the epidemic, if you like, not that much later, but a bit later.
When others, it was happening everywhere else, and it's like we're way above it.
And we thought that,
our lifestyle, because everything is like backdoor, there's behind the curtain, there's hush hush, there's
nobody talks about it. It's elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, and But then, like I said, in Nigeria now, even in Nigeria, there's everyone knows of somebody in their family or in their extended family who's HIV positive, whether or not they are admitting to it or not. There are people, everybody in Nigeria knows somebody who's HIV positive.
And I think, and this is from my experience from training mentoring, that some of the fundings should be directed at educating the healthcare practitioners.
How do you mean?
As in nurses, doctors dealing with these
who are on the front line?
Who are the front line to actually treat the infected patients a bit more cautiously.
Okay.
It's like post-abortion care. Some patients go to the hospital post-abortion and they're looked at like, how did you get that? How did you get to where you're at? Until some groups came in and they were proactive about it, and now they have centers where patients are saying, we can now confidently come up and say we've had abortion, whether it was spontaneous or induced.
Or whatever,
So the same thing with HIV positive patients, and AIDS patients. Some of the nurses, the frontline practitioners, they're still a bit wary, and rightly so, because just like we said, at the time when it was still hush-hush, a lot of them contracted it.
Yes. Yeah.
Because there was no universal precaution or any other ways of protecting themselves. So that's why I think some of these fundings, although we need the treatment, we need the drugs, we need everything, should be directed as well, especially to teaching and training at the primary care level.
Yeah. You know what? Any education and any education can only be good. Any education, anything to educate people, to say, this is what happens, this is how you should treat people. Any sort of education surrounding this, this whole HIV/AIDS thing can only be positive. I wouldn't know anything about how hospitals in Nigeria work, for instance, and especially not how they work with this whole HIV thing. I've never worked in Nigeria as an adult. You haven't worked in Nigeria as an adult. However, I do know that I have worked in other parts of Africa.
In Africa generally.
In Africa generally, I mean, to be honest with you, in other parts of sort of East Africa, Southern Africa, where the epidemic is more prevalent and has been around for longer, and has had a higher prevalence and incidence for longer. They're more used to it, and I think that they're more exposed and more educated. I mean, when the HIV epidemic first started working its way through Southern Africa, East Africa, you could almost trace it. It was the truck routes from the mines in South Africa. So these people who were mine workers would go and work, and they came from everywhere. They came from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Mozambique, Botswana. Exactly. So they would go and they would work, and they were sleeping with the commercial sex workers who were selling sex there, and they were being paid. Their wives were in the village. They'd go and they'd have sex, and they'd pass it on. They'd go back home, on leave for a month, 2 months, whatever. Now I know the public health scientists from America who were first called in when they kind of discovered this. The way they described it, when they came in and they described the epidemic, they thought, it's really not much of a problem because, well, they go in and it's kind of contained there at the mines, and they come home and they pass it on to their wives, who are mainly monogamous, and their wives are not going to be passing it on to anybody else. The only person who their wives are going to pass it on to is the next child, the next baby. That was it. Well, there's not really that much of a danger. So it's kind of confined there.
Yeah.
They're only going to pass it on to their wives, who are passing it on to the next baby, and the next child. It ends there because the next baby is going to die.
Yeah.
You know, but then they didn't envisage how much of a problem it was going to be. On the major truck routes, for instance, at every stop, everywhere where it's kind of deemed a stop. I don't know how well you know Nigeria. If I describe it in Nigerian terms, if you're driving from Delta or if you're driving from Benin to Lagos, you stop in a place called Ore. Yeah.
Okay.
So Ore is like a major truck, a major stop where everybody stops.
It's true, yeah.
So that kind of stop, there would be HIV. There'd be HIV concentrated there, for instance. So from where they start from in the mines, that kind of major stop where everybody's stopping, and some truck drivers spend the night
and focus on that.
And then the next kind of major truck stop or route. So that was how kind of how the epidemic was concentrated there, and then in this truck stop, and you could kind of trace where these people were traveling to. But then they forgot that these commercial sex workers also have homes, and when it's not mining season, or when miners are out of season or whatever,
they go back to
wherever it is they come from, and they spread it wherever they come from, and but then
so they missed the golden
they missed it
there.
They missed it, and it was when they discovered that, oh, hang on, it's not only there, it's here, there, and everywhere. They missed it, and the epidemic was growing a lot faster than they had imagined. So
Yeah, and there's a couple of myths as well about sleeping with virgins.
Oh gosh, yeah. Every day I pray that people have stopped thinking like that. But unfortunately, it is a reality where people think that if you have a sexually transmitted disease and you sleep with a virgin, it will cure you. Unfortunately, that happened, and I know there was an epidemic, a spate of children being raped because these men who are HIV positive believed that if they had sex with a child who was a virgin, then they would be cured. And a lot of children were becoming HIV positive from things like that. So there's that as well, which is a shame. And there's also other myths that say, oh, if you have sex with somebody and as soon as you finish having sex, you have a shower.
Oh, okay.
Then you're fine. Yes.
What part are you showering?
Exactly. So as soon as you do that, then you're fine.
I mean, we've got maybe 5 minutes left, and that's why I said, we still got to do this, because there are questions there. But talking about children, there's one important thing I want us to address, and one more myth for lighter mode is the Viagra myth. the Viagra, being on Viagra, will predispose men to having HIV.
I know, you told me that. I was laughing when you told me that.
And actually, it's basically not the Viagra.
It's not the Viagra. It's the fact that you have Viagra and you have sex with more partners
than you normally would do. It and
exactly.
Oh yeah, I'm good. Yeah, next, I'm good. I'm
exactly.
Good. And,
exactly.
So,
yes.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, we talked about the myth about raping children, virgins. So it brings us to the education, which is the first stage of prevention to start with.
Of course.
And the role schools should play in educating children on HIV/AIDS.
Well, I think that in this country, children are not told about sexually transmitted diseases until they are in secondary school. And I can't really remember how old it was, but I remember being 18 and being in my A-level class and being told 18 or 19, I can't even remember, and a sexual health nurse came in and was talking about condoms, how to use condoms, and I can't remember her saying anything about HIV. Now, granted, this was ages ago. When I was 18, was ages ago. So, maybe the epidemic was not as prevalent. It certainly wasn't as prevalent as it is now. So I don't really know how much education is being taught at schools. But I certainly think that children should be taught sex education, age-appropriate sex education. By the age of 16, a lot of kids are, whether we as parents,
9.
Exactly, whether we as parents admit it or not. By the age of 16, kids pretty much know about sex.
They do.
And I think by the age you leave it, you don't talk to them about it. They will learn. They will pick up myths and legends and believe that is
live that
and live it. And so I think that whereas we might not necessarily leave it to schools, that we as parents also primarily, I'm really not sure how much education is being taught at schools.
Yeah. And that includes sex education as well, and other sexually transmitted
diseases. Exactly. Exactly. Like I said, I was in my A-level class. We were taught about condoms and just taught that you have to wear them to prevent sexually transmitted diseases. But the sexually transmitted diseases were not necessarily called by name. You know, there's gonorrhea, there's syphilis, there's all sorts. You know, there's herpes all sorts. But I came out of that class not really knowing anything different that I'd known before.
Yeah, that's the thing. I believe it should start a bit earlier.
I think
because recently, actually, there's a program I've put on record. I think it's on, I don't know which of the channels. Where I saw the synopsis of it, and they brought this woman from Germany into the secondary school class to, you know, teach on sex education, and the children were saying they've experimented from age 9.
I know.
So, if they didn't know about condom, they didn't know about HIV positive, they didn't know about STD,
or pregnancies, or whatever, you know, at a very, very basic level.
We're not saying shove it down their throats. We're just saying make them aware. And I believe as parents, this should be our responsibilities as well, for girls and for boys as well.
Absolutely
because they are our future, really. And it's on us to make sure that they have a perfect, healthy future. Is there a cure yet?
No. Simple word, no. I mean, there's one patient who is called the Berlin patient who has been cured from HIV, and there was the Mississippi baby who they thought was cured, but then it was born in 2010, who they thought was cured, but then in 2014 or so reverted and became HIV positive again. So the Berlin patient is somebody who was HIV positive and had a stem cell transplant, and he had a stem cell transplant from an elite patient. So in the world of HIV, the people who are elite controllers, the people who are HIV positive and are able to suppress the viral load so they don't even need medication. So he got a stem cell transplant from somebody who had a sort of immunity against HIV. And there are people who, even when they contracted, we don't actually, you know. So they're called elite controllers, and then we have rapid progressors who catch it and go into full-blown AIDS straight away. So we have elite controllers as well, and I think at the moment there's a lot of trials going on to find out what predisposes people, how, you know, what the genetics is behind that.
Yeah, that's it. There's another myth that it's some blood types, but it's not actually.
No, it has nothing to do with blood types. It's probably more to do with genetics and probably something to do with T-cell control and how the virus attaches itself to the cell and gets taken into the body.
Okay, so we've talked extensively about education, prevention, awareness, how it cannot be contracted. How can it be contracted apart from sexual contact?
Okay, so anything that has to do with blood, okay, so it primarily lives in the blood. So sharing a dirty needle, so intravenous drug users, you know, the whole epidemic where, you know, intravenous drug users are coming down with HIV, you know, anything that, so apart from, sex, bodily fluids like breast milk, not saliva, not urine. So blood, anything that has to do with blood, and that's why bloods are tested before blood transfusion, or certain people who are deemed to be high risk are not allowed to give blood. So it's mainly sort of bloods during childbirth as well, and that's why women who are HIV positive, they kind of recommend that they have a C-section. But even before that, they have to bring the viral load right down anyway. So bloods, poking yourself with a needle, sharing a razor blade.
Shaving.
Well, shaving, you cut yourself and you're HIV positive. The next person who picks up the razor blade can catch it that way. So mainly it's actually blood. So people who traditional marks, where you have or where you have people who give somebody a traditional mark, and there's a whole conveyor belt of people who they're marking, you know, that sort of thing with the same razor. Circumcision. If you know, if you're using the same
knife or blade,
I have no idea what they use for circumcision. I have no sons, and I'm so glad. And I'm glad I don't have sons. I would have said it's not necessary.
Tattoo?
Tattoos, tattoo parlor. I remember when I was 19, I wanted to get a tattoo so badly. I walked into the tattoo parlor, but then I was quite aware of HIV, and I asked the guy. I said, "Oh, how do you sterilize your needles?"
Yeah.
And he looked at me. Well, this was in Gloucestershire. He's like, "You what?" And I thought,
All right.
this is not the place. And I didn't. And subsequently, my mother would be so proud I didn't get a tattoo. So it's So tattoos, anything that draws blood, can pass it on. A lot of people say, if you use the same toothbrush. So if I've got bleeding gums and then I'm HIV positive and you use my toothbrush, you can get it. You can get it that way, but
very, very.
Yeah. Not through food and not through infected oranges.
Yes. Oh my God. We could go on and on and on. I've had so much fun. I've learned so much on top of what I knew.
Oh, I'm glad.
And it can only get better. And I'm sure our viewers have enjoyed this as well. They've learned a lot. We've got more questions, that's why I think you'll be back very soon.
Oh.
Thank you very much for coming. I know you're a blogger, so tell us about your blogging, and your Twitter is
That's Bori Cafe. Bori Cafe, yeah. Bori Cafe.
Yeah.
So I blog about just everyday issues. It has nothing to do with my professional life. Sometimes I write stories, African, stories that kind of have an African theme to them. So I just blog about everyday issues, and so it's my break away from science.
Yeah, we want to know about it. We want to broaden our knowledge.
So I'm on WordPress. I'm on WordPress, and I'm also on Twitter. So my handle is Borikefe. Yeah, and that's my name basically.
Okay, right.
And that's the name I write with as well.
And I tell you, you've got to check that out. I tell you. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary. Thank you.
And so to our viewers at home, there you have it. There's a difference between HIV and AIDS. It cannot be contracted by just sharing mugs or spoons or kissing. But the most important thing is to know that it's a chronic illness, and there are other things attached to it as well, actually, especially, as the illness progresses, it manifests and, debilitates in other conditions.
We forgot to say, I know we're talking about blood, but also like in semen or vaginal fluids.
Oh, yes.
That's actually how it's contracted sexually, because it's present in that part of the body.
Exactly, yeah, in the semen, vaginal fluid, that's why, it gets through the other person. That's how it's transmitted when transmitted sexually. The other aspect is how it's transmitted outside of sexual intercourse. So all of these things are vital, and it's important as well to know that people who are infected are still human, and they need lots of care, attention, tender loving care actually. And if you're looking after somebody who's infected, don't forget to look after yourself emotionally and psychologically as well. I think that's one of the things we'll be addressing when next we come together. And until next week, please take good care of yourself as you live the life you love. Thank you.